Well, the Attorneys General Alliance Africa, in partnership with the South African National Prosecuting Authority, hosted the second virtual public seminar last week to engage with prosecutors and civil society on the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 and the implications for prosecutors. The attendees, legal brains drawn from various countries in Africa and the United States of America, deliberated on a raft of issues about ensuring not to criminalise poverty and sought creative and responsive ways to put in place to avoid this. They also explored steps that prosecutors can take to ensure that COVID-19 related regulations do not overly criminalise public transgressions, especially on the poor. Joining us now via Skype in Nairobi is Nelisa Ngqulana, Attorneys General Alliance Africa's senior prosecutor. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Hi, Flo. Just a correction. I'm the spokesperson, not the senior prosecutor.
Right. Just as a start, I mean, so many sectors have had to halt to a standstill, and though many can't afford to do so, the justice system really cannot, as it is beyond essential. What have been some of the challenges, and the people that you speak for, how has this affected their work, particularly as we talk about prosecutors in particular?
So some of the challenges have been that obviously we know that courtrooms are generally packed with people. So immediately many courts have had to obviously close. And in place of that, many prosecution offices have started introducing virtual courts. They've also had to prioritize working hours for prosecutors. For example, in Kenya, they're already working in shifts. There's been introduction of virtual hearings and special courts to handle COVID-19 related cases.
I'd like to talk about this virtual meeting that was held, and really how the work between African prosecutors and the NPA sort of came about, and some of the issues that were sort of ironed out and discussed. I mean, we've also seen, as we say, that the poverty has sort of been criminalized since the pandemic started or landed here in South Africa, where we've seen, people being prosecuted for going to the shops, for example, and trying to explain themselves, particularly when the army was involved. What are some of those issues that these prosecutors have been discussing as they have conversations around all of this?
So, for example, in the South African environment, what some of the prosecution officers have done was to meet immediately with SAPS to put together strategies to ensure that, for example, homeless people don't find themselves getting arrested because of this. So, as well as making sure that, offenses like, not wearing of masks are not overly, they're not over-policed, for example. So those are some of the measures that have been taken already to try and overcome this. So the background to the seminars has been that we knew that with the COVID-19 there would be a lot of regulations that would put an even extra burden on already burdened justice systems across the continent. So the aim of these seminars is to bring together prosecutors from across our continent to share best practices, as well as to be proactive around making sure that this pandemic doesn't affect the effective delivery of justice.
I'm just concerned about how courts in particular have been affected. I mean, in terms of the fact that, when you go to a courtroom, you're not really talking about the most cleanly of environments, and, you have criminals coming in and out and so forth. How can everyone really be protected as we go through that process? And certainly not everything can happen online. For example, a judge would have to see the accused face to face and kind of make assessment of everything based on many other factors, even body language, if one can put it that way. Sure. How has the pandemic really sort of affected how courts operate, how prosecutors operate, how magistrates and judges operate?
As I mentioned, many of the prosecution officers who have given input into our seminars have mentioned the fact that they've had to prioritize cases. So, for example, Advocate Ellen Zungu from the KZN, the Prosecution Authority, explained the fact that NPA has decided to kind of triage cases, so to hear serious matters in court where they can postpone matters are being postponed to later times, so that those cases, so that to reduce congestion. Working in shifts is also another way that the courts are trying to prioritize and making sure that courts are not filled with people. Only necessary people are now required to be in the courtroom, so to make sure that courtrooms are kept as empty as possible. And as I mentioned, some countries have introduced special COVID cases, special COVID courts, where only cases related to regulation transgressions are heard, and those can be heard virtually.
And I wonder if, there's been discussions about people who are already kind of worried about the fact that they've already got criminal records for what one can consider really petty crimes, for violating lockdown regulations. I mean, would the justice system, would the courts, is there a way that people can kind of plead their case in terms of removing that from their names? Because, when you're going for, when you're trying to get a job and you're trying to get employed, and there's that black stain of a criminal record, it might impact the rest of your life. Are these some of the things that have perhaps been ironed out for those people already sitting with criminal records?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what is being done is there are mediation measures that are being involved, put in place to ensure that people don't get heavily punished for these transgressions, as well as fines, a system of fines being negotiated with perpetrators for petty crimes. There's also negotiations around alleviating the congestion in prisons, because we know, for example, in South Africa, we have a huge problem with overcrowding, to start speeding up the process of parole for those inmates who were already on their way out.
All right, thank you very much for talking to us. Nelisa Ngqulana, the spokesperson for the prosecutors that, of course, have come together from South Africa, Kenya and Nigeria, together with the National Prosecuting Authority to discuss some of these issues. Thanks for your time indeed.